everybody. Glad to be here celebrating with you this morning. Let's stand and sing. We're going to sing a song this morning called Look to the Sun as we open up this morning. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on the Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. We look. Oh, we look to the sun. See salvation. Salvation, tearing through the dead of night. See the kingdom burst into color at the speed of light. Freedom, freedom, shaking up the atmosphere as the shadows fade to nothing as the day appears. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. We love, oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on the Savior, see the image of God, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. See, we look. Oh, we look to the sun. Yeah. Creation, we sing, come on. Creation, waking up to kingdom come. See the hope of heaven. See the hope of heaven, shining like the rising sun. Now forever, lifted up from death to life. There's no fear in love, and no darkness in His endless light. Beyond the skies we sing, beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. And we look, oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on the Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. We look. Oh, we look to the sun. Well, thanks for being here this morning. Thanks for watching online. You can have a seat.
Good morning, movement. How's everyone doing this morning? I can safely say that I'm enjoying this little bit of a warm up, which who would have thought 40 degrees was a warm up, but I'm definitely grateful for the weather that we've been having the last few days. So if we haven't met before, my name is Rachel, and Brent is also on the Zoom call with me this morning, and we're going to be your hosts for today. If you're new here, that term might sound strange, but basically that just means that we're going to lead you through the service and introduce a few things, just talk a bit, let you know what the next steps will be, and that we'll just be around in case you need other questions. So we're really grateful for this chance to connect with you. As you can see, we're both at home, and so that does look just a little bit different than what you might expect.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you. My name's Brent, and it's great to be with you today. And like Rachel said, we exist for you. The mission of Movement is to help people find and follow God. And so whether this is your first time with us, or whether you've come dozens of times, or I even think last week Evan said millions of times, regardless of how many times you've come to Movement, we exist to help you find and follow God. And so as we think about coming together today, we're in the second week of our message series called Unexpected. and we're thinking about who Jesus is and his attributes. And so it's great to have you with us as we learn more about him.
So, as Brett mentioned, our mission is to help people find and follow God. And in living into that, from the very beginning of your time here with us, we want to invite you into the mission and generosity. That's one of the things we talk about a lot. So if you're new here, we hope that one thing you'll learn is that we value generosity, and we want to invite you to be a part of that. So if it's your first time being a part of our community and you would like to fill out the connection card, we're excited for this new initiative. It'll actually be a $5 donation made in your name. So all you have to do is fill out the little card. There will be 3 organizations that we have to choose from that will make a donation to. All 3 of those donations focus on caring for kids, which is something that a lot of us are really passionate about here. And so you get to choose which one we make that donation to. So please take this time to grab one of those connection cards and fill it out.
Yeah, and if you have your phone with you and you want to scan the QR code that's right in front of the seat in front of you, you can do that as well. And that'll take you to the online connection card. As Rachel said, you can fill that out. But if you're old school or you just prefer to write it out by hand, there's also paper connection cards that you can fill out and you can drop in the box either at the back of the auditorium or out in the lobby. But again, it's just a way for us at Movement to connect with you, to let you know that we value you and that we want to walk alongside you as you move forward in your faith walk with Jesus.
Thanks for walking us through all those details, Brent. And thanks to all of you for being people who embody our value of generosity and for joining us in an effort to give to those in need. And now that we have our bearings this morning, we'll go ahead and head into our message.
How we doing? Hey, it is great to be in person and also online with everyone. I'm really excited about this journey that we're walking on together. As Brent and Rachel mentioned, through a series called Unexpected, and we'll get there in a minute, but I also just wanted to take a minute and say I love the chance to connect with you. My name is Eric. If we haven't had the chance to meet, I would love to be able to do that. I'll be hanging out in the Next Steps area after our time together, so make sure you stop by and say hey, and yeah, would just love the chance to connect. If you're online, give a shout out, fill out a connection card as was mentioned, and I'd love to be able to connect with you that way as well. But for today, we're going to continue in this series called Unexpected. We're walking through a book in the Bible called the book of Luke, and Luke is one of 4 Gospels, and the Gospels are the first 4 books in the New Testament that really just lay out the life and teachings of Jesus. And what's really, really cool about the Gospels is each Gospel is written by a different author and written for a different original audience. And so each one has a little different flavor and just some little details that look a little different, presented in a different way. But what's really cool is just the unity and the continuity between them as well. But for Luke's gospel, what I love about his gospel is that it's just a very detailed account of the life of Jesus. In fact, Luke was a doctor, and at the very beginning of the gospel, he says that he's thoroughly investigated and recorded what he's about to write. And as we walk through the book of Luke together, starting last week and all the way in through Easter, here's the word, and the reason for the series is really the word that I just think of so often as Luke records what he does, and it's this word unexpected, right? Unexpected things just seem to surround who Jesus is. And we look throughout the gospel, here's what we see. Jesus' entrance into the world was unexpected. His audience was very much unexpected. His priorities were unexpected. He spent time with people that nobody expected. His values were unexpected. His teaching was unexpected. And we looked last week at the idea that his friends and his followers were people
that were least expected. We talked about last week a guy by the name of Levi, who was a tax collector, someone who had stolen from the Jewish people, a traitor in their minds, someone that robbed from them to give to Rome. And no one would have expected Levi to be a follower of Jesus, and yet Jesus invites him into his inner circle, and he invites his friends to come along and to be a part of the journey as well. And so that is this unexpected person of Jesus. And so today, that's where we're going to pick up in our journey together. Jesus has chosen 12 people, 12 guys to be his disciples, his closest followers. They're now with him and walking with him. And when we get to Luke chapter 6, where we'll spend our time today, Jesus takes his disciples to the side and begins to share with them something that would have been truly unexpected. And so he gets them together and he says, look, I want you to know that I'm establishing a new community, a new way of doing things, and it's going to look quite a bit different than anything that you imagine. And so let me just give you a taste of the values in my kingdom, this kingdom that I'm bringing in. Let me give you a taste of the values. And that's what we're going to pick up today in Luke chapter 6. Check out what he has to say to his disciples. It says, then Jesus turned to his disciples and said this, God blesses you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. God blesses you who are hungry now, for you will be satisfied. And God blesses you who weep now, for in due time you will laugh. Now, let me just break down what Jesus is presenting here. Like I said, this is a value system that was completely different than anything that they had ever experienced. And Jesus is saying, look, the things that other people value, the things that other people feel are important, the things that other people would look at and say, this is what's going to determine the success and the validity of my life. This is going to determine whether I have a good life or a bad life. Jesus says, look, there's a different way of thinking, and it looks different. It's unexpected. And as they're trying to process through all of this, right, if that's not enough, they're thinking through his teaching. Jesus, as they're trying to navigate through all of that, and it's heavy and it's deep, and really they need to come back up from like the deep water and come back up to the surface for some air. But Jesus doesn't let them do that. In fact, if that wasn't heavy enough, if that wasn't something for them to ponder enough, Jesus gives what I would say is perhaps his most unexpected statement in all of the Gospels. He goes on in his teaching and he says something that truly would have caused people to stop and think twice. Did I really just hear what I heard? I mean, this is such an unexpected statement. One of the reasons why it's so unexpected is because it's an imperative statement. And if you were sleeping during English class, or if that's been 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years, and you're going, what's an imperative statement? An imperative statement is an instruction, or even more than that, it's a command, right? And so Jesus' instruction or statement isn't just hey, this is something good to think about. Jesus is saying, look, this is something I'm commanding of you. And so that's what we're going to pick up in just a minute. But as we're getting ready for what Jesus has to say, let me just ask you a question this morning. And the question is this: what is something that you have a limit on? Okay? What's something that you have a limit on? Could be, I know that's a broad question. Let me break it down a little bit. Could be an external limit, right? A limit that's placed on something for you. For instance, you may have a credit card limit. If you own a credit card, there's a certain amount of money that you're able to spend. There may be a speed limit, give or take a few miles an hour, right? But somewhere there's a speed limit. If you're a student or a teenager here, chances are you have a curfew, which is really a limit on how late you can stay out. Or perhaps you're a child or an adult. Either way, you have maybe a screen time limit on your device, right? Like there's only so much time that you're allowed to spend on that, and the struggle is real, right? So anyways, it could be external, but it also could be internal. I mean, think about some of the limits that we place on ourselves for our good. Maybe you have a limit with food, like I'm only going to eat X amount of pizza and then I'm cutting it off, right? I'm just going to stop there. Or maybe for you, You're not going to eat after a certain amount of time at night at 7:30. I'm done eating, whatever that time may be. Maybe for you have a limit when it comes to how many Hallmark movies you're going to watch, right? Like you have a limit there, or how many cats you're going to own. You have a limit there, right? So whatever that may be for you, I mean, that's your choice. I love cats. We've never mind. We had a cat one time, but that's another story for another day. More of a dog guy, but anyways, we have limits, right? And I remember a limit that we set pretty early on in our marriage. We came by it by accident, and what would happen is we'd get through our day. My wife and I would spend some time together at night, and then about 9:30, we would get ready. We'd lay in bed and get ready for bed, and she would ask me some kind of like really deep relational or life question. Yeah, it happened all the time, and then she would kind of wonder why my response was less than desirable. Let's just say that. And finally one night, I just wanted to go to sleep, and she asked me this question, and finally enough was enough. I said, honey, like 9 o'clock. After 9 o'clock, you're not allowed to ask me any deep questions, right? And some of you are there, right? Because you're just ready for bed, and the question gets asked. You're laughing because the struggle is real for you as well. And I just thought, man, I know you're not happy with my response. I'm not happy with the question, so let's just set a limit and let's move on from there. And here's what I know about limits, right? We all have them, and limits, truthfully, limits are there for our good, okay? Limits are something that exists to protect us. I mean, the speed limit's there to protect you at some levels. All those external limits that we mentioned, they're there for your protection. They're there for our good. And the same thing can be true as we look through the Bible. We see all the way back in the Old Testament that God had certain limits or rules they put in place. They're called laws, and they weren't there to hold people back. The law wasn't there to hold people back or to keep people from enjoying life. The laws were there for our protection and for our good. And laws and limits can really protect us. But yet what we're going to look today at is something that Jesus seems to be saying you need to take the limit off. Like this is the opposite. You're to take the limit off. And the truth is, when we take this limit off, here's what I want us to understand. When we take the limit off, there are going to be times in our lives where it's going to leave us open to hurt and to pain, where it's going to keep us unprotected and even vulnerable, times where it is not going to be easy. And I think it's because of that that for many of us, we're not sure we can go there. We're not sure we want to go there. And I think it's why we tend to have a tendency, right, to put a limit on what we're going to talk about today. Because deep down inside, we know that if we take the limit off of this, it's going to hurt. It's going to challenge us. It's going to cause us to live differently. And yet, if we're going to live the life God has for us, here's what Jesus says it's going to require. And so let's pick up Luke chapter 6. We're going to be in verse 27. Here's what Jesus says next. He says, but to you who are willing to listen, I say this: love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. And so the command, the imperative here is to love your enemies. I mean, Jesus makes it pretty clear. That's what he's asking. That's what he's asking from us, what he's asking us to do. But before we get there, and we'll live in this for a little while this morning, but before we get there, I just want to point out something that I think is so significant. As I was studying and preparing this week, there was this statement that seemed to stand out right from the very beginning. And it's this statement, but for those of you who are willing to listen. Okay, now think about what Jesus is saying there. For those of you that are willing to listen, and for me, this is just so fascinating because I can imagine Jesus pulling his disciples aside and saying, "Look, guys, you just left everything. You left your jobs, you left your family, you left your friends, you left everything to come and follow me and to be a part of this journey and to learn from me." And I want to share something with you guys, and let me just tell you, it's a game changer. I mean, what I'm about to say, it can change everything for you, but you're not going to be overly happy about it, and so you need to be willing to listen. Like, this isn't going to be easy. You're going to have to think through this. You're going to think at some point, maybe you might even think that I've lost it, but are you willing to listen? Now, if you have kids, and especially if you have teenage kids, I would say you've been there before where you've wanted to say those words, right? Like, if you're willing to listen, would you be willing to listen? I was with a couple of friends on Friday, and this topic of conversation came up, and one of my friends just expressed to me, he said that he had a friend when his sons became teenagers at 13, he'd pull them aside and say, "Hey, look, you're 13 now, and for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you're going to think that your dad has no clue what he's talking about," right? Like, you're going to think that he's way off base, that he has no idea what he's talking about. And then something's going to happen around 21, 22, 23 is you're going to realize that maybe dad wasn't, maybe dad was smarter than, what he looked, or that he knew more. And I thought, man, how true is that? Like, for our teenagers, there are times where I look at my kids and think, I know you don't want to hear this, and I know you're not going to like this, but just keep with me here. Like, don't lose this. And I think about Jesus being with his disciples who just left everything. He's like, okay, now if you're willing to listen to what I have to say next, it could change your life, but you have to be willing to listen. And for the disciples, here's a little perspective, or a little bit of a picture of why this might have been so challenging for them. You see, the Jewish people, Jesus' disciples were all Jewish, and the Jewish people, right, they had waited for the day that a Messiah would come, and when the Messiah would come, he would come in power, and he would come in glory, and he would come to take over and to rule over Rome and to take back Israel's place of prominence where they were on top, and he would use force, and everyone would know that God's in charge. And so that is the picture of what the disciples at some level were waiting to see happen. And Jesus says, look, for those of you that are willing to listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to love your enemies. I want you to love your enemies. Now, I can only imagine if their reaction were emojis, okay? So that's how we communicate right today. I mean, think about that. Now, I don't communicate that way. My wife, she texts me, I call her back, and then she yells at me for calling her. But that's just kind of how that works in my family. I'm one of those people that still picks up the phone and calls people. But most people talk in text and emojis. And I can imagine if life were, if there were emojis for how they were feeling as Jesus said, love your enemies, some people would probably look like this. They'd just be laughing, right? Like, Jesus, you can't be serious. Come on, that's a good joke. Like, I love your sarcasm, but that's never going to happen. For others, maybe they'd be pondering, like, hold on, what, what are you saying here, Jesus? Like, maybe, I have to think on that one a little bit before I go there. For others, it'd be, mind blown, right? Like, just, where do we, just how do I pick up the pieces, right? Like, everything I thought is now changed. For others, it would be others would probably be shedding a few tears, right? Because they're thinking about what the cost will be and who Jesus is saying to love, and they're not sure they want to go there. And then for other people, it would probably be this guy, right? Right? Or maybe a few of those, like, But, here's the thing, right? Like, it would have caused them to think, because what Jesus was saying was so unexpected. It was so unexpected. And part of the reason it was so unexpected is because every good Jewish boy and girl would have grown up in school hearing from the religious leaders and the teachers. They would have heard this need to love a certain group of people. In fact, Leviticus 19 talks about this. We've talked about it in here before on a Sunday. We've walked through this passage about holding a grudge. But here's what they would have heard. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. For I am the Lord. That's what they would have remembered when it came to love. And here's what happened because of that. What initially was given as a guideline, like here's who you're to love, turned into a limit, right, on who they would love. And the reason they did this is very quickly the Israelites made two categories of people. You had your neighbor, right? You had your neighbor who was the person who thought like you, who believed like you, who behaved like you, who treated others the way that you wanted to be treated. And so you had your neighbor, and then you had your enemy. Two categories of people, your neighbor and your enemy, and you were to love one and you were to hate the other or to do whatever you wanted to do. And of course, the Jewish people would say, I'm going to love my fellow Jewish person. I'm going to love my neighbor. I'm going to care for them. And anyone outside of my neighbor is unworthy of my love. Like they're not deserving of it, and they're my enemy. And Jesus comes to his disciples and say, okay, for those of you that are willing to listen, if you're willing to listen, I don't want you to love your neighbor. I want you to love your enemy. I want you to love your enemy. And let me just say, this isn't just challenging for Jesus' disciples that were walking with him, right? I mean, this is challenging for us. And not us in like you all, challenging for us as in we, like all of us. This is a challenge. I mean, this is a tension point. There's this place where we choose, all of us, I think there's a piece of us that we choose to place limits on our love, and there's a bunch of different reasons, but let's be really honest. We have these moments and these periods in our lives where we say, I'm only going to love up to this point, whatever this point is, whatever this group of people is, whatever this person has done for me or in this circumstance. And Jesus says, I want you to take the limits off. And so my question is this: who is it for you? Who is it for you? I think for many of us, we probably, like if we can just be transparent, if we can be honest with ourselves, it's probably not all that difficult for us. But Jesus says, if you need some help, if you want to know who those people are, let me give you a list. He says, I want you to do good to those that hate you. Now, most of us don't want to maybe even believe this, but we probably all know that we have people that hate us for something that we did, whether a year ago or 10 years ago, or for the way that we behave or we don't behave, whatever that may be. And Jesus says, I want you to do good to those that hate you. He says, look, I want you to bless those who curse you. To bless those who curse you. Let me tell you, this isn't always easy. Some of you know this. I coach soccer for my oldest daughter, so they're at this point they're pretty competitive, and I'm sure that there are times where I've been cursed by parents, and I don't necessarily want to bless them, all right, like that. I want to give them a blessing, but it's a different kind of blessing. But but you've been there, right? Like you have those people that curse you, or Jesus says, okay, well, maybe that's not you. Let me give you another one. He says, I want you to pray for those people. I want you to pray for those people that have hurt you. Now, we've all been hurt. All of us have at some point along the way, we've been hurt by someone who didn't do something they should have done, who did something they never should have done, who mistreated you, who caused you pain and hurt. And Jesus says, look, those who hurt you, those who hate you, those who curse you, I want you to love them. I want you to love them. Let's be honest. I mean, this is not easy. It's a tension point. It's a challenge. I mean, Jesus, how can that be? Like Jesus, you don't realize. Jesus, you don't know what's happened. Come on, like there's got to be a different way. And Jesus says, oh, no. If you want to know what this looks like if you're still going, well, maybe you can do a workaround, like, oh, I'll sort of love that person, or, I'll work around this and figure out how to navigate my way. There's got to be a shortcut somewhere. Jesus says, okay, let me walk you through a very practical illustration of what this looks like. And here's what he says next. He says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, offer the other cheek also. If someone demands your coat, offer your shirt also. Give to anyone who asks, and when things are taken away from you, we all love things being taken away from us, right? When things are taken away from you, don't try to get them back, but to do unto others as you would like them to do to you. And I think all of us, there are parts, even if you've been following Jesus for a long time, there are parts of the Bible that you just wish weren't there because you're not sure that you can, how do I rally around that? And if you're new and just searching for God, not even sure that you believe, that God is who he says he is in the Bible, you read this and you're like, I don't know. I'm not sure I can go there either. But here's what I want us to understand. This isn't easy stuff, but this is life-changing stuff. Because here's what Jesus is pointing us to is, as he begins to lay this out, he says, how you respond to people is an indication of who you follow. How you respond to people is an indication of who you follow. And as we unpack what Jesus is saying, I think it's important that we also just kind of maybe take a minute and talk about what he's not saying. Because, I think this passage specifically has probably caused a lot of pain in people's life, and they're not sure how to navigate through some. For instance, some of us think what Jesus is saying here is that you just need to be a pacifist and to get walked all over. And Jesus is not saying don't stand up for your family. He's not saying that you should just allow people to stomp all over you. I mean, there's something bigger that Jesus is talking about here. Jesus is not saying this either. He's not saying that you should put yourself in a relationship that's full of abuse. If you're being abused emotionally or verbally or physically, Jesus is not saying, hey, just stick it out and be okay with it and show them love and deal with it. That's not what Jesus is saying here. Jesus is not saying that other people's actions aren't important, that people should just be able to do whatever they want to do, and that you should just have to do. That's not what he's saying. But what Jesus is saying is this, that, guys, you're getting ready to experience some mistreatment. Following me is going to cause people to look at you differently. It's going to cause people to treat you differently. It's going to cause people to question things about who you are. It's going to cause people to ridicule you and to slander you. And Jesus says how you respond is going to make all the difference in the world, because how you respond represents the heart of God. It represents the heart of God. And Jesus says, in my kingdom, my grace is for not just a select few, not just your fellow neighbor, the Israelite. My grace, my love is for everyone. Everyone. It's a new way. It's something new. It's different. And sometimes, right? Sometimes this is going to be difficult. Sometimes you're going to question how you could even love that person. Sometimes there's going to be this tension, should I, could I, how could I? And there's going to be this point of tension. And here's what I need you to understand. Jesus is saying, here's what I need you to understand. Your love is not based on a feeling of whether you feel like that person deserves it. Your love is based on attitudes and actions. That's what it's based on. Look, if you've been married for longer than, 6 months or maybe 6 weeks or 6 days, here's what you know about love, right? I'm painting a really great picture of my marriage. I'll pay for this later, I think, today. But here's what you know, right? Here's what happens. You stand up and you share your vows, and there's love in the air, and there's this feeling, and then a little while later that feeling kind of changes. You don't live in that place forever, and then comes this point where you have to choose, right? Through your attitudes and your actions, you've got to choose to demonstrate love, not based on the feeling or what someone's done for you, but rather you just choose, you make the choice. I'm going to love this person. And Jesus is saying this: if the only time you exhibit love is when you feel like it or when you feel people deserve it, then you're missing what love is all about. He's saying that's not what love is about. Jesus says, I want you to love the people that are going to hurt you, that are going to harm you, that are going to want not what's best, but sometimes even what's worse for you. I want you to love them, because when we love people that are deserving of our love, it points people towards us, right? When we love people that have showed us love, when are about us, it points people to us. But when we love people who are undeserving, who are unworthy, who are hurtful, it points people to Jesus. It points people to him. And following Jesus is not about being a better version of us. That's not what following Jesus is about. Following Jesus is about being a more accurate reflection of who he is. That's what he calls us to. And here's what happens. You see, this means when it comes to love, you can withhold your love from me. Other people can withhold their love from me, but you can't withhold God's love from me. You can't do that. And because you can't withhold God's love from me, I'm not going to limit my love for you. It's a choice that we make. And Jesus is saying, he wants you to understand, I actually want to use you to help people discover who I am. And look what he says next. He says, if you only love those who love you, why should you get credit for that? I mean, even sinners, even those who are far from me love those who love them. And if you do good only for those who do good to you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners do that much. And if you lend money only to those who can repay you, like, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners will lend to others, sinners, for a full return. And Jesus is saying, look, you, this is not about you. And when you love in a way that is undeserving, when you love in a way that doesn't make sense, it doesn't point people to you, it points people to him. And imagine if a group of people decided to love in a way that reflected the very heart of God. Imagine. Imagine if you took the limits off of love. You see, here's the thing. Limited love points people to us. Limited love points people to us. Limitless love points people to Jesus. Limited love will always be about us. It'll always be about how people have treated us, whether or not they deserve it. Limitless love points people to Jesus because Jesus didn't choose to love us because we could do something for him. Jesus didn't choose to love us because we had all of our stuff together and all of our messes figured out. Jesus loves us. Jesus loves us in spite of who we are, in spite of what we've done. And so how do we get there? Let me just walk you through really quick. I'm going to give you just 3 things as we wrap up this morning. And as I was thinking about just the response to today, here's what I believe to be true. This is not easy stuff. I mean, Jesus says, hey, for those of you that are willing to listen, I want you to love your enemies. And here's what I need us to understand, like as a community, as a church, whether you're in here, online, wherever that is, like here's the thing. A lot of Jesus' teachings are not like, oh yeah, I'm in, or a lot of it's going to take some time. You got to reflect. You got to go, God, what is it for me? What are you calling me to? God, how do I need to change? How can I become more like you? And I don't think it's a 25 or 35 minute message that's going to get you there. I think it's taking time to really just let this sink in and go, God, what does love require of me? God, what is it? What's the step you're calling me to take? Who are the people? Excuse me, that was nice. Man, I really tried to hold that in too. All right. Who are the people that God's calling me to love? And so let me give you 3 steps as we wrap up. The first one is this. I think it starts by asking for God's help. Now, here's what I mean by that. There are certain things that we see laid out in the scriptures that, I'll just be really honest, we're probably never going to get there on our own. They're countercultural. They go against some of our wiring, our humanness, and this is one of those areas. In fact, Jesus says, hey, look, I'm not just going to leave you high and dry. Like, I'm promising you my spirit so that my spirit can guide you and give you direction, can give you the power to live this out. And I think so often we think we got to do this on our own. And I would just say, would you begin to ask, just God, will you help me to live this out? Will you help me to love people in that way? In fact, in the book of Galatians, we read about the fruit of the Spirit and talking about when God's Spirit transforms your life, like what does that look like? And the very first thing we hear is the fruit of the Spirit is love, all right? As we invite God in, as we ask God to show up and we ask God to move, one of the very first things that's going to happen is it's going to change the way that we love. And Jesus says the way it changes is no longer about you, but rather it's about him. Now, the second thing that I think builds on that is we need to ask for God's vision. Ask for his vision. What does that mean? Okay, let's be really, really honest here. How many of us more than likely are seeing other people differently than how God sees them, right? Like that's a challenge in of itself. Like, God, would you help me to see people as you see people? It's easy to see those people that we love and that we love to be around, that love to be around us, that we laugh with, that we celebrate with, that we share time with. It's easy to view those people as a blessing from God, but what would it look like for you to see people as God sees them? The next time that someone hurts you, the next time that someone seems to be against you, the next time that someone says something hurtful, that withholds something from you, what if instead of immediately jumping to how you view them, what if you were to simply go, God, how do you view that person? The next time you get on social media and someone says something and you're like, oh, here it goes, and you get ready, God, what if you step back and just said, okay, how does God view that person? What matters to God? And what would it do to begin to view people as God views people? And the third thing just builds on that is to beware of God's grace. Here's one thing I've learned over the years, and it's true in my life. I think it's true in your life. We're really good at receiving grace, but we're not always really good at extending grace. And I think so often it's because we've never really accurately stepped back and said, man, what does God's grace in my life look like? But the more aware of God's grace that we are, the more that we're able to extend grace and love to other people. I love how Jesus ends his teaching in Luke chapter 6. He says this. He says, love your enemies, do good to them, lend to them without expecting to be repaid, and then your reward from heaven will be very great. And you'll be acting as children of the Most High. And then he says this, for he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. Now, I think many of us might read that and know some people who are unthankful and wicked, but that's not what Jesus is saying here, right? Jesus is saying there's a point in all of us where we were unthankful, where we were, the scriptures talk about being enemies of the cross, right? That we were actually opposed to God, that we were not just unthankful, but we're actually in opposition. And even in that moment, right? Even in the place where we didn't deserve love, even in times when we were hurtful, where we withheld, where we were anything, where we were hateful, where we cursed God, and yet he chose to love us. In fact, Paul writes it in the book of Romans. He said, but God demonstrates his own love for us, that while we were still sinners, or while we were still separated from him, he loved us. Our love, limitless love, our limited love points people to us. Limitless love points people to Jesus. Let's pray. God, I just pray that today that we would take a step towards being people who express limitless love. God, I know every single one of us in here is challenged when it comes to loving people as you love them. God, it is never easy. There's always a cost. And yet, God, you demonstrate your love for us that while we were unworthy, when we were just unable to express love the way that you called us to, you sent Jesus to die for us, God. That you loving us cost you everything, God. So, God, my prayer is that we become people that really reflect that image. God, for some of us today, we've just never felt like we deserved your love, that we were ever able to be good enough, that we were that we were just undeserving of your love. God, my prayer is that today would be a day that we recognize that in the midst of all that, you chose to love us. God, that you did not withhold. God, my prayer is that today would be a day that we just accept that we make a decision to surrender to that love, to acknowledge that you love us. And God, as that love transforms us, I pray that we would truly be people that live a life of limitless love, that models and reflects Jesus' love for us. It's in his name. Amen. Well, hey, hopefully on your way in, you saw a couple tables with some communion elements. And one of the things that we're doing in this series quite a bit is taking some time for communion. But as I think about, just specifically today, when I think about love, Jesus gives us this cup and this bread, this cup of juice that represents his blood poured out for us, this wafer that represents his body broken for us. He gives these simple elements as a reminder of how he loves us in spite of our brokenness, that he loves us in spite of anything we could ever do. And he demonstrates that by being willing to lay everything down for us. And so as you're ready, you can take communion.
As you're finishing up, feel free to stand up and join us in this song and allow yourselves to kind of take in the lyrics. I love all the lyrics in this song, but especially at the beginning of verse 2, when it says, when I was your foe, like actively fighting against you, still your love fought for me. It doesn't matter if we were right in the middle of fighting against what he's trying to offer, and he still fights for us. So allow yourself to think through these lyrics, and if that means you can't sing at the same time, that's okay. Take a moment to accept God's love, and then when you're ready, you can sing with us. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.
song called Even the Impossible. And I can't help but to just say this, is that those steps that you take to love your enemies, those aren't steps that you take alone. It's true, it's hard to walk through that. But even the impossible is possible for God to do that in us. We just gotta be willing to listen and take those steps. Sing together, it goes like this. So do what only you can do, move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. So we sing that again. So do what only you can do, move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. Yeah. I think this stone's getting ready to roll. I think this stone's getting ready to roll. I feel a faith that is starting to rise. And I see a world on the edge of revival. I think it's only a matter of time. So do it only you can do, move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. Yeah. Check this out. I see a grave, and I see a grave that is hollow with power. I see a battle that's already won. I see a church, and I see a church on the verge of revival. Yeah. I see a kingdom is already come. So do it only you can do, move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. You can make the chains come loose. You can tell the mountains move. Even the impossible is possible for you. Come on, even the impossible is possible for you. You said it. You said it. I see it. You still do miracles. There's power in Jesus' name. Oh, all darkness defeated. There's nothing stopping you, my God. There's nothing stopping. There's nothing stopping you. You said it. I see it. You still do miracles. There's power in Jesus' name. Oh, all darkness defeated. There's nothing stopping you, my God. There's nothing stopping you. Sing so do what only you can do, move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. You can make the chains come loose. You can tell the mountains move. Even the impossible is possible for you. And even the impossible is possible for you. You said it. Come on, let's sing one more time. You said it. I see it. You still do miracles. There's power in Jesus' name. Oh, do you believe? All darkness defeated. There's nothing stopping you, my God. Got one more in you. Come on. You said it. I see it. You still do miracles. There's power in Jesus' name. Yes, there is. All darkness defeated. There's nothing stopping you, my God. There's nothing stopping you. Let's do that one more time. Just Sing that out. Speak it over our lives. So do what only you can do, right? So do what only you can do. Move what only you can move. Even the impossible is possible for you. You can make the chains come loose. You can tell the mountains move. Even the impossible is possible for you. Sing one more time. Even the impossible is possible for you. Thanks for worshiping with us. You can have a seat.
It is powerful to sing songs and hear the lyrics, especially to songs like Reckless Love. I know for myself that whether you sing along or whether you just listen and really take in what the song is about, that is a song that I find in my mind playing time after time. And it's especially in those moments where I need to be reminded that God has gone to great lengths to show his love and for us to experience what it means to be a follower of Jesus. If you're interested in the devotional book, you can find those. For those of you gathered in person, back at the Connection Center, you can find a devotional book on Luke that follows along with this series on Unexpected. For those of you online as well, if you're interested, there's a Kindle version that will allow you to follow through and just dig deeper into this series. But regardless, as we learn about an unexpected God and his reckless love, we invite you to dig deeper into Scripture and the Word as we begin to understand more fully what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
And as we respond to today's message, I'm reminded that it's the generosity of people like you that makes a way for us as a church to extend the kind of limitless love that Jesus calls us to in our community, to the city of Findlay, and extending even beyond our city limits. So we do emphasize generosity at Movement quite a bit because giving is another way of worshiping God. And as we live out generosity, we know that God will use what we give to further the mission that he has called us to as a church. So we want you to know that same QR code that you used earlier to make to take you to the connection card can also be used to bring you to online giving. Or you can feel free to use one of the envelopes in the seat pocket in front of you and place that in the drop box as you exit the auditorium. Or again, if you're online, if you're watching there, you can also contribute, and you just need to go to movementfinley.com/give, and you can share your generosity there.
Rachel, it's great to host with you. It's great to be with you today. And as we say every week at Movement, go and be the church.